to reading this book and go, oh, this is even more close to others. But you just have dozens of those chapters.
It's very fun. I had the best 25 minutes.
Okay, that's a question. So good answer to that.
Weeks then, because I can get experience.
Okay, actually, that's a good question. So good answer.
I mean, yes, exactly.
So just
Your base.
And stream that
we're live streaming. Oh, we're live streaming and just to carry on. Sorry, just how cute is your dress? Oh my God. What part of Charlotte are you from? I went to Aberdeen University. Very more south. I could hear it. What time is it? I am very much like her daughter. But you know what? I have to take some like really get to it to get so this could be
to packing our north.
yes, even I.
Yes.
And there's a lot of Google Maps and Google Maps to be
And then a lot of traffic as well.
yes.
No, that's fine.
Let's give it another 10 minutes.
That's fine. I just wanted to switch on live because
Yeah, because then that way they can see.
So in Madian, yeah. Mama, yeah, that was the part that gets me yesterday. Voy a poner con girl that was
Well, I think I have friends that have arrived yet. I think 5 more minutes.
Okay.
5 more minutes. And then. It's okay. I think she's over there moving. Okay, let's give it 5 more minutes. Because I have good friends who aren't here yet. I can do it I have to send you.
Good evening, everybody. We will be starting in just a couple of moments, so you can take your seats. Thank you. It's possible. I'll just come back to
I want to stand here. I don't want to be so exposed. But like in the middle of the room, I'm like not protected. I'm just being protected. I want to do that. I'm practicing for my text. Okay, Rita's here. Okay.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to the Cyprus launch and indeed the first live launch of the book, Are You This or Are You This? The compelling story of Madian al Jazerah. My name's Ben Rawlings. I'm the Deputy British High Commissioner in Cyprus. The British High Commission is really pleased to support today's event as part of our series of activities over a year of focus on LGBT plus issues and rights. For some time now, the UK has been a champion of LGBT plus rights, and this year there's a particular focus on that. We are the co-chairs, along with Argentina, of the Equal Rights Coalition, which is a global coalition of countries trying to advance LGBT rights around the world. And next year we'll be hosting Safe to Be Me, a global LGBT plus rights conference that coincides with the 50th anniversary of the official first London Pride. But we're also co-chairs, along with the Republic of Cyprus, of the Council of Europe's Focal Points Network. That's a group of countries looking at how to promote and improve the rights and well-being of LGBT people internally, domestically. So we have a series of activities and work between the UK and the Republic of Cyprus over the next year or so. All of that work is very important. But when we talk about LGBT rights and issues, we're really talking about people. We're talking about identity. And that's why being able to support today's event is so great for us, because that's what this book really is about. And really, with one simple question, are you this or are you this? Madian has cut right to the fundamental question of identity and belonging. Madian's background and mine is very, very different, but there was a lot in how he wrote about that that really chimed with me. And I think that's one of the really great things about this book. It tells Madian's story, but it tells in a way that lots of people can identify with. So without any further ado, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Madian and the writer who's really captured his story and brought it to life, Georgiou. Thank you very much.
I'd like to throw out some thanks first. Thank you to CVAR for this wonderful space, and a special thank you to Rita, and I don't see her, Rita Severis, so very, very gracious and so very, very generous. Thank you. I'd like to thank the British High Commission for actually sponsoring tonight's event, and they have been instrumental really in bringing together a lot of people here. We have members from Queer Cyprus, which is wonderful, and we have members from Accept here tonight. And I want to say bravo to the British High Commission and a huge thank you. And thank you to Mahi Solomon, who has been our cheerleader. Everyone needs a cheerleader. We had Mahi. Big thank you to Muslim Bookstore, who are selling books here tonight, took time out of their busy schedule to be here. I think one of my favourite parts of the book, and I've changed what I was going to say, Madian, but my favourite part, one of the favourite parts of the book is when there was this little 5-year-old Arab boy who was sent to a British school in Kuwait and brought this whole new culture into his home. And there's one scene where he's running around with this toy sword, and the religious aunties are in town. And one auntie says, "What the hell is he doing? What's he doing?" He's running around with the sword and he's saying, "I'm a Christian soldier and I'm marching off to war for the love of Jesus." And I think that "Are you this or are you this?" actually started right there. When Madian came out to his Arab parents when he was a grown man, because he was in fear of his life because of his sexuality, his mother said, "Are you this or are you this? Because if you're this, it's okay, you're not a homosexual. If you're this, you can get married and you can have children and you could marry a lesbian. If you're this, it's okay." This, of course, is about patriarchy, it's about oppression, it's about power. And it kind of transcends into many parts of Madian's life which relate to identity and worth. Are you a Palestinian? Yeah, I'm a Palestinian, but it's not where I'm from. Are you an Arab? Yes, I'm an Arab, but I'm blonde and I'm blue-eyed, and I have a British accent. Are you a Muslim? Yes, I'm a Muslim, but I can't embrace the Islam of today. Are you a gay man? Yes, I'm a gay man, but I still live in the shade. So these issues of identity and worth are really what developed as we were writing the book. The book really, I feel, wrote itself. We sent it to Hearst Publishers in the UK only because we liked the books they published. We thought, they write really good books, let's send it to Hearst. And they got back to us in the very same day. And they said, "We'd love to work with you, send us a manuscript." And then on our very first Zoom session, it was me and Madian, because of COVID, it was on Zoom. And then there were all these intellectual types, these academics and these intellectuals, and they started talking about things like otherism and post-colonial Orientalism. And Madian and I called each other and we said, "Shit, we are not in that league. We don't know what these people are talking about." But then intimidation gave way to a great collaboration. I do want to say that Hearst Publishers came back and they said, "We need one more chapter or two more chapters because this is falling very, very short." And Madian had hit a wall. He couldn't remember anything. He was just spent. But we needed to produce material. And that very week, Sarah Higazi killed herself. And I think Sarah Higazi had to be in the book. Sarah Higazi is the Egyptian lesbian who went to a concert and held up the rainbow flag. And she was thrown in prison and she was tortured. And she killed herself because she couldn't take the pain anymore. And I love that we gave Sarah a voice. She has a chapter and she has permanence in our book. And I love that about the book. Another thing I love about the book is matriarchy in the book. I love the way that Madian's mother and his sister and his aunties are presented as they're honored and they're respected and they're revered. And I love that we could show that. I'm going to pass over to Madian and he will. I was supposed to read, but I don't want to read matriarchy. I don't want to read. I'm not going to read. You do the reading. I'm not going to read. I think questions are much more interesting. So Madian will do a reading and then we're going to open it up to a Q&A. So I'd like to introduce Madian Jazerah, who is a gay, hold on, I'll get it right, Palestinian, Muslim, Arab, activist, and a very dear friend.
Thank you. She stole my wind. You said it all.
Well, you're reading.
So, But I'm really happy to be here. This is really special because although I carry a Jordanian passport and I consider myself Jordanian as well, Jordan can't offer this to me. So you're my first people, is what it is. So thank you for that. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for not even knowing who I am and yet coming out to hear this, and thank you for the British High Commission and all the thanks to the museum and lots of people. I'm going to read just a little bit, and I think a lot of times, most of the time, questions and answers really take a beautiful direction in offering an opportunity for me to explain and to tell my story. So bear with me. It's going to be very short. I don't like reading. She does. Don't like writing, but she does. and I'll point towards this way. Okay. So this is our book. Are you this or are you this? And watch me stutter. So Mama came to New York to visit me after we had not spoken for weeks. We're a close-knit family, a tribe, taught from the earliest age that you never go to sleep mad. As young children, we would go into each other's rooms to hug it out before bed. Mama and I could not have survived the silence much longer. I had come out to her and Baba a few months earlier, and it had not gone well. She arrived in the early afternoon. I went to meet her at LaGuardia Airport. I was in New York then. And we took a cab and traveled in silence to a gay bar in Chelsea. I'm not sure what possessed me to take my mother to a gay bar. I think it was defiance. I came to New York after fleeing Amman because of my sexuality and because I had had enough of Amman making me feel like dirt. Now I was saying, this, Mama, is who I am. Sorry. I thought I was saying something wrong.
This is what talking in the microphone.
Luckily, it was quiet, and she had absolutely no interest in her surroundings. She was calm, true to herself and true to her style, very composed. When she finally did speak, her only question was, can you explain this to me? Can I explain what, Mama? This thing, the thing you think you are. I tried to explain being a homosexual without mentioning sex. It wasn't easy, and I was fumbling. She wasn't even listening. She was distracted, fidgety. Finally, I said, Mama, what's wrong? What's on your mind? She took a long, deep breath. Looking around, she closed one hand to indicate a hole, while extending the index finger of her other hand and making a poking motion towards the hole. Are you this? She asked, raising her closed hand. Or are you this? She said, while poking with the index finger of her other hand. I gulped my drink and stared at her. Mama, it's not about that. It's not about that at all. You have to understand, being gay is not just about sex. Just like you love Baba, I'm looking for someone to love. She said nothing. I had 2 more drinks and we sat in silence. She was squinting and thinking hard. I knew she had more to say. Mama, what is it? Again, asleep, a slow, deep breath. Habibi, if you are this, and the index finger came out, poking a little more furiously than the first time, then it's okay. You can get married. You can marry a lesbian. I gasped and fell back in my seat. Mama, why on earth would I want to marry a lesbian? And you can have a baby. There are plenty of Palestinian lesbians that would love to have a baby with you, she said, on authority. Initially, I had thought that my mother's issue with my sexuality was fear of what people would say and of disgracing the family. There's certainly a little of that, but I realize now that it's about her idea of normalcy. Mama wants me to have a normal life, and as long as I am this, index finger extended, then there's nothing to worry about. I'm still a man. Mama's not closed-minded. She was a teacher, and her sisters were also teachers. They wrote academic books on history, language, and geography. Their names are still in books used for teaching across the Arab world. Mama's also a true matriarch and a class act. Not only does she command respect, she demands it. She's the youngest of 5 sisters, all born in Palestine. They were all strong, educated, dynamic, stylish women who set the stage for us in how we saw women. I couldn't, therefore, comprehend how she could have such a limited view about sexuality. It upset me and consumed me. The conversation came up again 2 years later when I was living in Amman. My 2 aunties were visiting, always a big occasion in our household, and we were all together in Mama's salon having mahmoud cake and tea. The ma'mul is right when you walk in, you should try it. Auntie Koot was the religious auntie who seemed to have a direct line to God whenever she disapproved of something we did. She was conservative, but also had a fun, playful side. Auntie Adan, we say it in Arabic, Auntie Adan was the modern auntie. She was cosmopolitan and liberal and always supported us in everything we chose to do. They could not have been more different from each other, and they were always in complete disagreement. But on this occasion, they were very much on the same page. They wanted to talk to me about my sexuality right there, right here, right now, in Mama's salon. It was an obvious setup. They started talking about homosexuality in general terms, as if it was the usual topic of conversation at afternoon tea in Amman. As if they were experts on gayness, lesbianism, and sex, and as if I wasn't there. I could see where this was going. Auntie Adan said, "There is nothing in our religion that talks about this or condemns this. You know this, right?" And she looked straight at my mother. "Not in the Quran?" asked my mother. "No, there's nothing against homosexuality," said Auntie Adan, knowing. "Absolutely nothing. There's nothing in the Quran." "What about Lot and his tribe?" asked my mother. "No," said Auntie Koot, shaking her head. "Anyone who has studied the Quranic narrative knows how ambiguous that story is." "What about Sodom and Gomorrah?" my mother went on. No, said Auntie Koot with certainty. The Sodom and Gomorrah story is not about homosexuality at all. Theologians dispute this every day. Auntie Koot gave me a self-satisfied, reassuring smile. She was suddenly an authority on homosexuality and world religions. Meanwhile, I sat back, quietly, eating cake and sipping tea, fearing the worst. Auntie Adan turned to Mama and said, Why are you so bothered about this? Don't you remember Shukri? And what about our distant cousin Jamil?" And she began throwing out names of apparently gay men they had known growing up. They weren't all gay. They weren't called gay, of course. They were called mishnafa'in, useless, underperformers. They couldn't perform sex with a woman, so they were less than, and they were apparently fully accepted by society. It was definitely a conversation for my benefit, and the aunties obviously had my back, but I was dying. I think about it now and I still feel shame. My mother was suddenly emboldened and moved forward in her seat to face me. She looked me in the eye and asked me again, "But I don't understand, Madian. Are you this or are you this?" And again, one hand was cupped and the other was poking with an extended finger. It was still bugging her. "Why is that even important?" exclaimed Auntie Adan as she glared at my mother. "Well," said my mother indignantly as she fell back in her chair, "if he can poke, he's a man." And I'll stop right here. This book is not just about me being gay. It's about patriarchy. It's about matriarchy. It's about the power that masculinity has forced itself on women, on society, on other men, and on the gay community and the lesbian community. And it's all, and they put everything into tiers. Man, woman, and then everything else comes below. It's all structured. And it's all about value. And I talk about value and worth because it doesn't just apply to being a gay man. It applies to being a Palestinian. It applies to being a displaced Palestinian. It applies to being, to living in a country like Kuwait, where I was born and raised there, yet was never given a passport or a residency, was never allowed to complete my love to a country I was born and raised in by being a national of it. I didn't belong anywhere. And this is what this book is about. It's about my worth and the value that I finally realized in myself, because it took a while. But it's the value that everybody else kept placing on me throughout my life, just because of who I was. And being an Arab, being a Palestinian, being a Muslim and being gay, everything was robbed from me. Everything. I can't be a Palestinian. I can't be an Arab because I'm so mixed. When when you're a Palestinian, you live in so many countries. You go to a British school, you learn to say thank you with an F, not even a TH. And that, and we traveled the world and went to university in the US, and in being in Kuwait, my friends were from all different nationalities. So this identity crisis just increased and got bigger and bigger and bigger. And as it got bigger, I started to lose myself more. Because I can't say I'm Palestinian again. I can't say I'm Kuwaiti. For the life of me, can't say I'm gay. And being a Muslim, saying it's not the same. I grew up in an Islam that was so different than the Islam we see now. So I've been robbed. I've been robbed of my Islam, the fun Islam, the open Islam, the easy Islam. I've been robbed of being of my ancestry and my history of being a Palestinian. I can't go there. I can't even go there and look at the books to figure out what my real last name is. This is in the book as well. I have 3 last names. I can't go into Palestine to do my research, figure out where the hell did I come from? And as an Arab, I don't look at it. Although Arabs are mixed, we come in all colors and all shapes. And when I speak in Arabic, nobody can figure out where I'm from. It's so mixed. I don't even have a particular accent that someone can say, oh, you're from here. Because we're very tribal that way. We know each other. So this book is my truth. And June 10, this book was released. And June 10 is when I actually came out to the world and said, I am a gay man, and my name is Madian Jazerah. Because this is the first book that a gay Arab has actually outed himself voluntarily and thrown himself in fire, probably. There have been other gay Arab writers, but they were all fiction books on fiction and stories. But this is a memoir. So this is me at the age of 56, finally saying, this is who I am, and here I am, and here's my story. With that, I don't know how many people here have read the book. Please, fingers up. So there's a few here. I'll just, as I said earlier, I think the best thing is to start accepting questions, and things will start to flow, I think, in the right way. So if anyone wants to start, Mahi, please, yes, help me.
Well, Ella introduced me as a cheerleader, and she was right. I was very captivated.
Yeah, because
I said Ella introduced me as a cheerleader, and I'm right. I was captivated by your memoir. I was so touched where the romantic elements of it were totally unrelatable to me. And obviously, as you said, the elements of work, identity, and the yearning for loneliness are motives that keep repeating themselves in the book. And having read the book and seeing how many cities you've moved around, how many countries, I wanted to know whether in any of these places have you ever felt a sense of loneliness, in a place which made you feel more valued, and where your identity and were not such a big question.
Well, I've been desperate for a long time, so I have lived in so many places. Even in the US, it was Oklahoma where I went to university. Then it was Boston. I kept following Ellen around, by the way. I lived in San Francisco, I lived in Honolulu, I lived in Washington, D.C., and I lived in New York City. And now we live in Chicago. As a family, we're kind of moving in that direction. Every place I lived, I wanted desperately to belong. And I would look for everything that would be positive, that would make me love the place, and I would. But then like a true Palestinian, just I kept getting uprooted. You know, whether I didn't have a residency, or whether in the stories you will read, I became a target. And this is what happens. You know, people view homosexuals, they view gay men as less than. And I get targeted, less than and weak. And there's always that one bully that will make your life difficult, or this one controlling abuser that will come at you in a place of power and drive you out. So I was continuously being driven out, or uprooted, or laid off here, or laid off there. Everywhere I moved, I wanted to be part, but could never be. I finally ended up in Georgiou, because I was really, you know, we carried a Jordanian passport. Palestinians, the majority of them carried the Jordanian passport. And I loved it. But it doesn't love me back. I still love it. I still want to live there. But it still doesn't love me back. And I'm, you know, I'm just tired of running. So I stand in defiance, and I'll see where it takes me. So, crazy.
Can I ask whether getting this book published and the making of the book was for you to start it? Has it crystallized what the most important part of your identity is, and where you might find it, if you so
Writing a book is, I think everybody should, because, or a memoir at least. Suddenly I had a timeline of my life, and I was looking at it. We don't always do that. And I would, you know, I would look at it, and I'd, you know, and I'd look, oh wow, you know, things just start jumping at you. This is the seed of that problem, or that bad direction, or this is the result of, you know, everything started to fit on why things were happening. Or when I mentioned that, you know, there was always this one abuser, or this one controlling freak, or, you know, or who would prey on my weakness, I always pointed fingers at them. But the problem was me. Yes, they were abusers, and they were control freaks, and they saw my weakness, and they jumped on it. And that's valid. But it was very important for me to look at this timeline and realize that I'm the problem as well. That I was weak, because I'm a survivor. I'm a refugee. My parents are refugee twice, but I'm a refugee once. And it was bad. And when you're a refugee, you take the short end of the stick everywhere. You keep your head down. You accept the abuse. Even when, you know, because you're always afraid that, you know, if I speak up, I'll get laid off. Or if I speak up, I'll get deported. We lived in Kuwait. I was born and raised in Kuwait. And the biggest issue as I was maturing and growing older, and it was always in my ear, every April, the whole household would be in stress, because we were worried that would the Kuwaiti government renew my father's residency? Because if they didn't, where would we go with Palestinians? We can't go home. Where's home? We didn't have a home. And every country we went to, we made a home. We made it our home. But we kept moving around. So this book has shown me a lot of things. It has explained a lot of things. It's also explained trauma to me. There was a time when we were writing the book, and you know, we're such a close family. So every day while writing, we're going back and forth with Ellen, with the stories. I'd go upstairs and hang out with the family, and I'd try to get more information on particular stories. And when I do that, you know, they'd give me more information. I'd run down and record it, and Ellen would rewrite it. But a couple of times I would tell a story. I'd go upstairs, oh, Mom, I remember when this and this and this happened and that happened. It would have been one of the big dramatic stories. You know, and my mom and my sister, they'd look at me and say, that didn't happen. I'm saying, what are you talking about? This is like a major event in my life. And it's like, it didn't happen. Or it didn't happen that way. And I ran down to Ellen Ellen, stop, we can't continue this book. I'm fibbing, I'm making stories up, something's wrong. And for a week we stopped. And I called up everybody that I knew that studied psychology or was a doctor or whatever. Do I need to get an MRI? What is going on? I'm telling stories. Only to discover that, and that's from the book, only to discover that when you're traumatized, and trauma comes in different ways, and sometimes it comes in bits and it compiles and compiles and compiles and it becomes big. So it doesn't have to be an explosion, or something like that. And when you're traumatized and your body can't, your emotional state and your emotional identity cannot handle the pain that's coming your way, it switches. There's a threshold. Everybody has a threshold. It's like when you're watching a horror movie and you know something gory is going to happen and you know you're not going to handle it, and you just turn. And that's what the body does to you. That's what the mind does to you. When something really painful is coming your way, your subconscious realizes, this is big. Let me divert. Something happens and you see things differently. Your perception becomes different so you can handle the situation. That's one of the big lessons I learned from this. Because I realized after that I had forgotten so much. There are a lot of people that I didn't remember. I had dated someone for 5 months in San Francisco, lived with him for a couple of months. Many, many years later, which is just a few years ago, I get an ad on Facebook. And I look at the picture and the name and it's like, looks familiar. I couldn't even recognize him. It was the same person. But somehow I had shelved that story. It was a good relationship, but it was in the midst of my trauma of being uprooted from one place to another, from riches to rags. When Kuwait got invaded, we lost everything. My whole life just did a spin. And although it was a good relationship, I shelved it. It just shelved it with lots of other things. I couldn't even remember the person I lived with, that I loved. I flew to Paris to talk to him. It's like, please, where did we meet? And some of what he told me I remembered, but most of it I couldn't. I still can't. So I was advised by my friends and by others, and Ellen supported that as well, is you write as you perceive. Your perception is more important than what really happened. And that's what I did. So yes, I did. There's a lot I learned just by writing this book. And a lot I've solved or starting to solve.
This is for you. This is for you and Alan separately. What did this book, the experience of this book, teach Alan about being an ally to the LGBTQIA+ community and to you as a person who's queer? And what did it teach you about helping others learn to be allies to the queer community?
Helen? Talk to this because they're going to keep.
I would say to that, I'm still learning. This is personal, but I have a son with special needs, and I hire a buddy for him, and I hired a buddy, and I was told Andrew would turn up, and Andrew turned up, and Andrew was an Andrew. And I didn't know how to deal with that. Sometimes it was Andrew, sometimes it was Andrew. And Louis, my son, was confused because he was used to LA hot Latinas, and suddenly we had Andrew. And I said to Madian only yesterday, what's great, Madian, is this, I don't know how to refer to her yet. I call her, I say it's a she, but I stumble because it's obviously a woman who's transitioning to a male. And I said, what's wonderful? She's 20 years old and she grew up in Cyprus and she's never been bullied once. And Madian said, yeah, because it's a girl transitioning to a man. If it was a man transitioning to a female, you bet your life they'd be bullied. And I learned from that. I'm still learning about this, the difference. I'm still learning about how to address, trans people. And I struggle with it. So I would say you're just still learning. I've learned a lot from Madian, especially, about this dynamic. If you're a trans male, you're going up in the world. If you're a trans woman, you're going down in the world. Right?
The hierarchy.
The hierarchy.
This is a really interesting one because this is what the book talks about, actually, is how for a gay man, we come in after women because we've stabbed manhood and masculinity in the back, but in their eyes, by wanting to be a woman. And that's not what being gay is. Because by wanting to be a woman, or not, it's not even a want, when you identify as a woman, gender-wise, you're a trans woman. And that comes even further down the hierarchy of abuse. Because to the patriarch, to the male, masculine male, misogynist, a gay man is less than a woman. Because I've betrayed my right as a man to be a masculine man right at the top of this hierarchy. But in answer, how do I align? What is it?
What have you learned from the
Yeah.
process of the book? Have you learned anything?
Can you repeat the question? See, forget.
Okay, for me, the thing I took away from this book was how to always learn to be a better ally to my friends who are queer, to people I don't know who are queer, and they deserve the same respect and rights, regardless of if they're this or if they're this or whatever they identify as, or whoever they identify as. But I say this as a cis straight person to you as someone who is gay. I'm learning from you, but have you learned how to help people understand or just be a better friend to people who identify as other?
Well, I just said that Madian is an activist.
Okay, I was about to jump up and say
I'm
that.
sorry. No, he's a gay activist and he does it every day.
It's just how he
Advocate.
is.
Oh, yeah.
In the book,
Yeah.
you'll I talk about Books a Cafe. Books a Cafe is something that I put together 25 years ago. And it was a bookshop cafe that just turned into the safe space because I didn't, I wasn't of the industry. I'm an architect. And so I just did things like I would do things at home. Very hospitable, very open. And I just enjoy meeting people. And didn't realize that with my openness that I had started to create a safe space. And by creating the safe space, I started to get people who came in for help. From teenagers being gay teenagers in love, being beaten up, broken bones, showing up on my doorstep and saying, help, we don't know where to go. Or the trans woman or the trans man who, also just got beat up or harassed in the street or even raped. Or even the straight women that would run away from their families, from abuse, from a husband or whatever. They would just show up at the cafe. And this cafe suddenly became this something much, much bigger than a cafe. And before I knew it, I became an activist. I didn't even know it until the French ambassador calls me up and says, come over for a cup of coffee. I need to talk to you. And I go over thinking, French ambassador. And he wanted me at that time. It was 2015, I think, when the UN had announced that gay rights and trans rights are human rights. So it was a big event in Paris where prime ministers came and all sorts of people on the higher end of things. So I was called in and he was telling me, we want you to come. We want to take you to Paris to attend this conference in celebration and, to represent Jordan. And I'm like, whoa. I'm not representing anybody. what are you talking about? You know, you have a government, go you talk to the government. And we said, we did. We talked to the government and they said, they gave your name. And I'm thinking, why did they give my name? They said, well, you're an activist. And that's the first time I knew I was an activist. I was just doing it. So I've helped a lot. I didn't need to do this to help. I've helped a lot. I've gotten in trouble a lot. And one great thing that Ellen insisted on in this book is that this book needs to be light and have humor in it. But I promise you, all the stories in there were not that light. They were very painful and they were horrible. And being displaced and being beaten up and being abrased emotionally is a horrible thing. But we wrote it in such a light way because we wanted everybody, we didn't want people to walk out of this depressed. We wanted to send a message, but come out of it alive, you know, lively, because those who have experienced similar stuff would hit a chord and an emotion, and those who don't need to read it with a light heart so it could stick. So, allies, the only thing I came up with is the word that I made up, emotionary. You can do anything if you use your emotions the right way to convince others to be allies with. It all happens with love. Okay, and I know that sounds really corny. Oh, it's all about love. It's not that. If you are gentle, use your emotions to be gentle with everybody. You can turn them around to be your allies. And I think that's what I got out of the book. Question. Tough.
Hi, Madian. So first of all, thank you for writing this. I don't think I've read anything that I can relate to more than this book. My question is, what advice would you have for someone who's thinking of a queer person thinking of coming out to their parents? And what advice would you have for the parents who are receiving the news from your experience?
You know, I'd like to think that all parents are like my parents, that they love me back as much as I love them. But that's not necessarily the case because there are abusive parents. People have problems, and the variables are always different. You come out when you're strong. This is what my dad kept telling us as Palestinians. Well, he wasn't saying come out when you're strong, but he was saying that as a Palestinian, your weapon in life is success, education, education and success. Because when you have success, you have power. And when you have power, that's it. People need to accept you as a Palestinian. You will be able to, force your way into a place or into, a setting or a community or whatever. It's about success and power that comes from success. So for the gay community, the LGBTI community, depending on the parents and the surroundings and the culture you live in, wait. Seek your help from others until you are on your feet. And when you're on your feet and you're financially stable and independent, then tell them. And they need to know, because we're all unique and we all have our individual unique journeys and lessons that we need to learn. And we think that by coming out to our parents that we're hurting them, it may look that way, but it's growth for them because we need to grow. It's growth on both sides. We have to offload it. We cannot live our lives negated, and especially negated by the people we love the most, like our parents. You come out when you're ready, when you're strong, and hopefully they will turn around. Because, you can't kill love. They love you. It's an energy. You don't destroy it. It changes form, but it doesn't get destroyed. They'll find a way to reform it and come around. But it's their lesson as well. It's not just our lesson to carry. But it's tricky. It's tricky. But if ever anyone's going to come out, and I think everybody should, sometime in their lives, because we can't be negated. We just cannot. How long do you live? This to me was the biggest statement of saying enough. No one's negating me. I'm out publicly now. I needed to do that. The rest can now. This is my lesson. I've come this far with my lesson to come out. Now it's everybody else's lesson to accept it or reject it, whatever it is. Please.
Madian, you spoke a bit about this, but you have, it's fair to say, a complicated relationship with Jordan. Talk us through your thought process in weighing up what your future with regards to Jordan might mean by writing this book, and just if you have to make your peace that things might be more difficult for you in Jordan now that this is published.
It is difficult already. I've spent all my life running. I'm not going to run from this unless I have to. And I'm fighting for Jordan. There's, in the book, I had to run 3 times for my life. Then thinking it's my life. And maybe I over-dramatized it, but it was pretty tough. I can't run anymore. I will not run. I will fight. I love Jordan. I love it. It's the closest place to what I am and to who I am. It's the closest thing to being Palestinian as well. The accent is similar to what my mom's accent and my auntie's accent. The culture is very similar to our culture. Okay, it's diverse, but one part of it is very, very similar to who we are. The architecture, the stone architecture, the stones they used to build is very familiar to me. The songs, the food, the cucumbers, the smell of cucumbers, the watermelon, things just, you smell soil. I grew up in Kuwait. There were no fruiting trees. So suddenly now I live in a country where, you walk and you pick your figs and you pick your olives and you pick your lemons and oranges in the street and peel them. It's such a beautiful, the Mediterranean is such a beautiful place to be. I think you have that here as well. You eat as you walk. How can anyone leave that? I'll fight for it until I have to run. Please.
What was the reaction of your family and friends after the book was published?
See, this is what hurts me the most, is I can stand here in Cyprus and have this turnout. It's beautiful. And I can't have this in Jordan. I don't know. I haven't had this in Jordan. But the friends who have read the book, who are Jordanian or Palestinian, a lot of people, the book isn't just about being gay, and that's the thing. It's about identity in general, and the multiple identities, and the politics that go with it, and the politics of the countries around us, and the oppression, and a bit of history here and a bit of history there. They all identified with a lot of that. There's also, when I talk about living in Kuwait, I love Kuwait. I love it. I was born there and raised there. But Kuwait was an apartheid state. There was Kuwaitis and there were non-Kuwaitis. The Kuwaitis lived there and the non-Kuwaitis lived there. And we left Kuwait, I was 21. When I went to college, I was 16. But I kept going back and forth, and at 19, I lost my residency, which meant I could only go back and stay 20 days at a time. And then I would have to leave for a week while my parents would apply for a visa for me to re-enter back to my home during the summers. And, You know, if you were Kuwaiti, if you a Kuwaiti and non-Kuwaiti, same degree, you work in an office, his salary would be 3 times my salary. In Kuwait, Mama worried about having us out in the street for too late at night, or going out to friends' houses, because the police would target us. They'd pick you off from the street and they'd take you to the station and they'd shave your head off. So to me, for the longest time, the joke was every time I saw someone with a shaved head, it's like, oh, you got caught by the police. It was not even, it could never be a style that we could take, because it was linked to that. So, I forgot your question.
Your family's reaction.
My family's reaction. I didn't give it to my mom to read. I'm still dodging it. Because as loving as my mom is, and as important as she is to me and to us as a family, she holds us together. She's just, I love my mama, you know. But when I came out, something changed. I used to hug my mom a lot, and I used to get hugged back. I used to hug my dad a lot and play with their hair and sit on their lap. But even at an older age, I forced myself. And it was okay. I would moisturize my mom's legs. And I would do it because I'm very physical. I hug everybody. After I came out, there was a lot of respect from my mom and dad to me. But the hug stopped. But then after we wrote that, and I read it, after it got printed and I read it, it hurt me. And I wasn't going to accept it. It was the truth, but I wasn't going to accept it. I started to force myself back on mom. Now I'm moisturizing her legs again. But that was the... No, it released me. And by reading it, which answers the question, by reading what we wrote about what I said about my mom, stopping the hugs, I realized that why do I allow her to stop the hugs? I'm going to get it back. And I did. So the poor thing, when you come out to people you love, they don't know how to deal with you either. Just, you know, you don't know how to deal with them anymore, and they don't know how to deal with you, and you drift. And that's what happened between me and my mom in that aspect. And I just brought it back, just reconciled it. So that's Mama. My sister has read the book 5 times, and now she's highlighting it, and she's, you know, she's going to turn it into her own personal research, because that's what she does. My other brothers, my eldest brother was the problem, and I think he hasn't read it yet. But the one older than me, he just cried. He kept crying. He talked about it, he started crying. And my friends, a lot of them were clueless on what I was actually going through, because I always kept this facade, kept a good face, kept the power, kept the strength, fought it, and that's what happens when you're a survivor. You learn to just fight. You know, you put all your emotions behind you and you fight, you stand, and it takes a toll on you. But you forget how to react, because you're used to one kind of reaction, and it is, you know, defiance. I'm going to fight this. Stand. You forget how you feel, the emotions and the turmoil that goes through it while you go through it. Please.
I don't know if this is the place I'll start and see how it comes out. I think what I find interesting in this book, what I find interesting about the presentation is it appears as a binary, you know, are you this or are you this? I think, as you kind of implied, that it's telling kind of stories, and I find that very interesting. The stories of your identity, your movements, of your having kind of shift and change. And I think what kind of seems to be kind of like also from the way you're presenting things is that you also found many ways to belong, which I find interesting. you appear to want to belong to the culture, to the soil, to the people. You want to belong to your family, even if they've been making it difficult for you. So I find that very endearing. I think that's a very positive message as well. You know, it's a fight. There's also an urge to belong. I find it very interesting.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, please.
My question is around the writing process of the book. How did you do that? And it's also a question with you. How did you find his voice? Were there any tensions and difficulties? I'm really
Okay.
quite practical as well. How did you?
When he told me that his mother he told me that he had come out to his mother, and I said, well, what did you say? Don't forget, I've known Madian since we were 20. We've known each other for 40 years. So I don't think anybody could have written a book if they didn't have that insight. Because, again, he does have memory issues. Sorry to talk about you like you're right here. He does have memory issues. And I would say, do you remember that time? Do you remember that time?
Yes, please.
Do you remember that time, Madian? He couldn't remember. He couldn't remember. And I said, Madian, you don't remember. He couldn't remember. So that really helped knowing him so well. But when he told me what his mother said, I said, you're joking. That's the title of a book. And then we had this banter. And then he says, you know what, actually, I've written a couple of chapters. And I said, can I see them? And then he sent them. They were dreadful, right? And I said, Madian, you know what, why don't you come to LA? I was living in LA. Why don't you come to Los Angeles? And we'll write a couple of chapters together.
That's not how she said it. She said, she called me up in Amman and said, Madian, get your ass to LA. We're writing a book. That's how it happened.
I think that's what I said. The process was that he would come to my home like 3 or 4 days at a time, and I recorded him. And then he would leave, and then he would come again, and I would record him. I have to say that for me it was a very easy process, and I hate to say that because people struggle. But I had this material. You know, when you have the ingredients, you can make a fabulous cake. You know, I mean, I had all the ingredients and I think it just took off. I think it's a book that had to be written, but the actual process, it was, I recorded Madian and then he disappeared, and then it was a question of crafting the book. I think what I remember is that when we finished the book, Madian got cold feet, as is understandable, and he didn't want to do it after we'd spent writing this book. And I just thought, I'm just going to give him time, because he was very nervous. And I think he came around.
It was a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
It took a week.
How long was this writing process?
And again, I hate to say this, it moved very, very quickly, because I would get up at like 4 a.m. because I was like, I wanted to do it, and I would write all morning. I would say a couple of months, very, very, very fast.
And were there any difficulties? Were there ever any kind of crunchy points where you felt that it wasn't quite right?
Yeah, I mean,
was there conflict?
That's the thing, is that we went back and forth with it. She would write, she'd send it over, I'd read, I'd put in my lousy way of writing in between where, I don't think this should be like this because this is how I felt. Or she would call it, she would tell me, fill in this area needs to have your feelings in it. And then she would recraft it again. But I have to say, the crafting of the whole book, which I think is, to me, is genius. That was Ellen.
It's me.
I can tell a story by standing here and telling it.
I think, I think the conflict as a writer, because I find writing very easy and I'm very, very fast. But the conflict for me was I kind of wanted to take over, and I wanted to, develop character. But I couldn't, right? And those aunties for me are magic. And I keep going back to, I said, these aunties are just magic. And his mother, and I wish I could have developed those characters more, but it wasn't my story. So that was hard for me, and I had to step back. But there was no conflict.
No.
No, there's no conflict.
Not a bit.
Yeah.
It flows so easy, so quick.
Yeah.
And we keep saying, this book wrote itself.
So maybe there's a missing chapter about the two of you, or are you in some way in it? Because this is an amazing relationship.
She is.
We're in
We're
it.
in
If when you read the book, yeah. Yeah. Yes, I'm in it. Yeah. Well, no, he remembered the way I was at 20. And I was thinking, gosh, was I really so bossy? And was I really so, and that was wonderful, actually, to see yourself the way that he saw me at that age. Yeah.
But it goes the other way around, because when I wrote it, the dreadful writing was gloom and doom. At 56, I was tired. 55. I was tired. I'd, been clobbered so much. So all that could come out of me was the gloom and doom of the 55 years of my story. And it was Ellen who said, wait a second. When I met you, you were not this. You were light, you were funny, you were all over the place. I'm going to write it in that tone. And that's where I think that's the genius as well of it, is we completely turned it around. That's why at the beginning I told you the stories are light.
I kind of regret that it all happened so quickly, because looking back, I wish that I had crafted it more and there was more development and we spent more time on it. But you sent it to a publisher and they whipped it up the same day. And I just think, gosh, it's like I got on a train and but then it maybe part of the beauty is the simplicity of the book. Maybe that's part of the beauty of it. Yeah.
Thank you.
I chased her around, by the way. Everywhere she moved to, I'd show up. She'd forget me, but I'd show up. Yes.
So, what is it about the current moment, maybe in your life or in the broader LGBT rights situation, or broadly that companies write this book now? Why is it that you can out this also publicly now?
At 56, there just comes a time where you develop, you keep going through crossroads in your life and in your personality, and you change, and situations keep turning you around. I think my major changes started when my father passed away. And that's when I was dying to finalize my identity. Who was I? It was my dad's death. And that's, and the stories show that I started to look for my last name. Where did it come from? Why do we have 3 last names? Who am I? Why am I? And I will never, okay, doom and gloom again. When I was washing my father when he died, and I was washing him and I was looking at his body, it's an amazing thing that his hands were my hands. I had his hands. I had his shoulders and elbow. I had his feet. I had his chest and nipples. Because when you're washing someone you love dearly and in such an emotional, you see all of these things, you never forget them. But actually, for a while after that, I didn't want to look at my hands. I was in so much pain. But that was the turning point for me on identity. Who am I? Where did this attachment to my dad's body just did a spin? I needed to know where I came from and why I was the way I am. I needed to complete it. I started it at 55. I think that's what it is.
I want to ask you, with all these identities that you mentioned, how is your relation or your experience in Cyprus? How did you experience Cyprus being carried on around and all these identities? What's your opinion about the movement in Cyprus?
In Cyprus? Amazing.
Other countries.
Cyprus or other countries?
How is your experience in Cyprus?
In Cyprus. I have an affinity to Cyprus generally, because all Palestinians have a plan A, B, and C. Plan A is where you are. How are you going to survive it? Plan B is if shit hits the fan, what country will take us? And if we don't have one that will take us, we need to start planning for a country to take us, meaning a passport or a residency. And then there's Plan C, which is just the passport, because now St. Kitts and the Caribbean countries are selling passports. So we've got that all down. Cyprus was one of the places, is and still is, a place where most Palestinians are buying property, because we don't find ourselves very different Palestinians. Because when somebody says Arabs, it's a very broad brush. Arabs from the Gulf are not the same as Arabs from the Levant, not the same as the Arabs from North Africa. So the Levantines, you are Levantine here in Cyprus. We are no different, except for the language. If I took a video at a wedding, everybody's hands would be in the air. You would not know the difference until you put the music. And even with the music, sometimes it's almost the same. So to me, Cyprus, and to Palestinians in general, Cyprus is another country for us. If Cyprus opened and gave us passports, we'd probably all be here. because it reminds us of who we were before. The liberal, easygoing Palestinians who were not robbed of their Islam and had their women suddenly covered. I was 19 when I saw the first hijab, and I'm like, what the hell happened? Who are these people? What country are they from? Cyprus is very close to our hearts. In terms of the gay and lesbian movement, I think it's come a long way. It's amazing what's going on. You have rights here. You have unions here. You're recognized. You don't need to be negated by anybody. When the system acknowledges and looks you in the face and says, yes, you are a gay man, and yes, you can have a union with someone you love, what else does anybody need? That's having full rights. And Cyprus has given that. And Cyprus is so close. We used to always say, oh, the Cypriots are like us, the Cypriot. But then comes the LGBT issue, and no, Cypriots are not like us. The Cypriots have jumped 10 steps forward, and we're still in the back. All my respect, actually, to the system here that has given us, or given the LGBTI communities in Cyprus and their loved ones and their families that right and that recognition, not negation. I think that was a good answer.
I think it was.
Alonso.
Yes, what you just said about the Levant identity, I see very clear. Being from far away, I always see the same identity here, somehow, somewhere in the Levant. Congratulations for the book.
Thank you.
Thank you, because I think it's part of the story of all of us who have to justify who we are to everybody. Yesterday, I did it to the doctor that I went for my teeth. He was asking questions, and your wife, and I said, no wife. So coming out has been a process of everyday life and different way every time, because everybody's different, has different ideas, we take it differently, and you never know. I thank you for the book, especially because it could be kind of a tool for many people to see how you deal with pain, taking the sheet of the light and make it a pressure, make it something positive out of it. Becoming more worthy as a person, more strong. And your final treasure will be to get liberated with the book, as you keep being a Palestinian, without any Patrida country home. Question is, was it a Madian before this book, and now that you became an author, you have written a book that you will put in your book store in
Unfortunately.
But inside of you, would you say that this book changed your life already?
Yeah, it has changed a lot of things. I'm comfortable. You know, when I received the book, I couldn't get people were buying and reading the book, and I hadn't received my first copy because it couldn't be shipped to Jordan. It could, but I was terrified, and I was afraid of what could happen. And then I got the book. You should have seen my face. I mean, my smile split my face in two. I was gleaming. It was just such a beautiful this feeling of liberation. I could, I had that for 2 hours. It's about 2 hours. And then, because I literally, I wanted to go out in the street and say, yes, this is who I am. I am not hiding anymore. Those were the 2 hours. And then I remembered, no, I can't.
So
So
I
it
just
began
want to
to
clarify
change.
that Madian owns a bookstore in Oman, and he can't sell his own book in the bookstore. This is the irony of it.
Yeah. My own book, I can't sell it. But the book has, it gave me that liberation. But now, of course, like always, I have to manage everything. I have to manage this feeling of being liberated because it can't be everywhere. It can't be in every place I go to in Jordan. It's only in certain households with certain people that I could feel this liberated and talk about it. But that's what I will fight for. But to be honest, I had already planned my exit. So maybe it is a liberation. If I find myself being pushed to leave Jordan, maybe it is another form of liberation. But I'm ready for it because June 10, when it first came out, I had already pre-planned with the family that I would be moving. And we booked the tickets and everything, but, Defiant Me just wouldn't do it. But I was going to move. So.
And you've still got plan B, I think.
And C. Caribbean, yeah. If all else fails, I'll buy a passport from the Caribbean. Please.
Very proud of you actually and success studies in Egyptian. I came from this part of the world where I know how hard it is to be with it. Like you and you like Sarah Yazi and a lot more until they are, paving the way for the life. My question, like reflecting on your journey, you have been to many countries, seen many cultures, the main question is why you are not accepting differences? And is it a mix of legacy? Is it religion is playing a role? The statement of the more religion is it maybe less accepting of being different? Do you see this in journey, or how can you explain why you are in any kind of difference?
How can I explain why?
Why you are not accepting the difference?
Why I'm not accepting the difference?
The community.
The communities.
Yes. And how is this from community to the countries that they have been?
Yeah, I'm glad you're Egyptian. I don't know how old you are, but we were all accepted. The Arab world was something completely different 30 years ago, 35 years ago. Egypt was a beacon. Cairo was a beacon. Damascus was another beacon. Beirut was party town. Jerusalem, Haifa, all the Arab world was the go-to place. The intellect, the acceptance, the liberal attitudes, matriarchy. Our women in the Arab world were all over the place. I honestly think and believe that we had equality. We had full equality. But we all got robbed off of it. We got robbed. Politics robbed us. occupations, the creation of wealth in countries, and then suddenly money dictated. Who robbed my Islam? The Wahhabis, in reaction to the Shiites in the Ayatollahs of Iran. Now we're getting into politics. We were robbed. They covered our women. Our women were leaders. You know, the Prophet's wife led an army, and another one was a businesswoman. She asked the Prophet for his hand in marriage. This is who the Arabs were. This is who we were. And I'm happy you're Egyptian and you say that, because people need to know that Cairo was it. Alexandria was it. And we got robbed. They covered our women. And they believed that it was, and the poor women who are covered come and tell me, but I chose to cover. Of course you chose to cover, but they brainwashed you. They made you feel like, you're going to burn in hell. And how can all of this come at us when 35 years ago, from the time of the Prophet, for 1400 years, our women were not covered, and then 35 years ago they decide that's it, you cover or you're going to hell. Where did this come from? Like every other thing, money in certain countries started to dictate their politics on us Levantines, or civilizations that come out of Egypt, way ahead of the money, and they rob us. And in other cases, they occupy us. Me, as a Palestinian, I'm robbed of my tabbouleh and my now it's Israeli couscous, and it's the falafels is suddenly somebody else's and it doesn't belong to us, and the hummus is now everybody's and it's not the Palestinian hummus. We got robbed all the way through. We got stripped. And they convinced the world that we're backwards and that we're behind. Mind you, when I talk about things like that, politics is one thing and the people of these countries is another thing. And when I talk about Israel as a Palestinian, there's something called Zionism and then there's something called Judaism. And they don't come together because there are Palestinian Jews. Lots of them. I was just in LA and I was shocked at the amount of Lebanese Jews that I met at a few dinners. So, Judaism is a religion, Zionism is an ideology, two different things. I was not robbed by Judaism. I wouldn't be a Muslim if I didn't believe in Judaism. I got robbed by Zionism, alongside the support of a few others with money.
You have to write down.
I'm escalating this.
Yes. This is what I said. No, I've actually been told that other scared of Rita Severis. I forgot what I was going to say.
No, I think just finish the question.
I've been nudged. Is there a final question? And then we're going straight outside for some wine, and there'll be more. Madian will be there.
And there's some ma'mul.
In the book
I spoke of the ma'mul. It's out in the.
Yeah, so we can talk. We can actually talk more in the lobby, and you can talk to Madian one-on-one if you didn't. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you.